Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's Intermissions Industry Session. Those of you that have joined us before will know that these sessions are designed to give young film programmers and those interested in finding out more about film exhibition the opportunity to talk directly to people working in the sector and related professions. Today we're really pleased to welcome Bryony Forde, Theatrical Sales Director at Altitude Film Entertainment, to talk through the role of a film distributor as well as her own career path and advice for those looking to work in the sector. If you have any questions for Bryony, please can you submit them through the Q&A function below rather than the chat function, just so it's all in one place and makes it a bit easier. And again, as always, today's webinar does have live captioning. To access this, please use the caption button at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so hi Bryony.
Hello.
Thank you for being here today. I'm going to start with a question that I think we've started with every week actually, which is, did you always want to work in film distribution? And can you tell us a bit about your career path to date?
Well, thank you for having me. No, I didn't really want to work in film distribution, but mostly because I don't think I really knew what it was or that it existed as a career. I did philosophy at university, which obviously doesn't obviously lend itself to lots of career choices, but most of my life there was taken up with the film, the cinema, at the student cinema. So that was in Sheffield, and then after that I worked for an organisation that's called Cinema for All. Now, back then it was called the much fustier title British Federation of Film Societies. So there we helped people set up film societies and community cinemas and pop-ups. So that was great. I worked there for maybe 4 years volunteering, and then eventually hung around long enough until they started paying me. And then as part of that we had a booking scheme which film societies could book DVDs through Cinema for All to show in their communities, and that brought me into contact with distribution a lot closer. So that's when I got a job for Network, who are an independent, mostly DVD home end distributor, but they also did some films like Tom at the Farm and Helly and No with Gail Garcia Bernal. So they had a good thread of independence as well as more traditional DVD releases. So I worked in the marketing and PR team there, and then got my first theatrical sales job, which again, even though I was worked for a distributor, I didn't really know what that was until I moved to Icon in 2014. I worked there until they sadly closed, and then STX, which is another independent, but it's more commercial based or leaning. And then now I work at Altitude. So yeah, doing theatrical sales, talking to cinemas all the time.
So with you currently working for Altitude, I'm not sure if you just said, but it's obviously an independent film distributor. So I'm wondering if, before we go on with the rest of the questions, if you would be able to explain for some of the people watching how that differs from, say, a Hollywood or a studio distributor.
Well, the most obvious one is money, in that they've got it, we less so. But yeah, they obviously, you know, your Disneys and your Universals are international companies, so they're releasing their films around the world at the same time, usually, or quite close to each other, whereas we just deal with the UK and Ireland for Altitude, our distribution arm, at the moment. Yeah, so they will obviously see a film from development a lot of the time through to release, and whereas sometimes we'll join in when the film's already made. They'll acquire things as well at festivals, but the main focus of their business, I guess, is to produce the films and then release them kind of all in a one-stop shop, whereas we can get involved in different times. And yeah, we have smaller budgets to market things with and to make the films with, and yeah, at every point they have more money, I'd say. In general, obviously they have low budget things as well, and every film will have a different budget, but that's probably the biggest difference. I think I've made it sound like it's a terrible arrangement, but I think the way it benefits us is at Altitude we're such a small team, and you know, we can be quite reactive if we see a trend in the market or a particular kind of film that we want to release. You know, as long as we can justify it to our boss, we can kind of go and do it, whereas you know, they'll have to go through different levels of corporate decision making that can slow things down. So that's a big difference as well.
That's great. So you said that you working at Altitude, you have a bit more freedom in what films you want to work in. So, and you also very briefly mentioned festivals. How do you choose which films you want to distribute? What are you looking for, and where do you go to source potential acquisitions?
Yeah, well, we our acquisitions team are constantly being sent scripts from producers and sales agents throughout the year, but it'll definitely ramp up around film festival time. So they'll go to Cannes and Berlin and Venice, Toronto, and the more industry friendly ones like AFM in America. So yeah, and then they'll go and they'll screen some completed films. They'll take meetings with sales agents who will have packages of, you know, they might have a director and a couple of cast sorted and the script, and then we'll get involved in that stage, or we might buy the finished film after we've screened it. So there's lots of different stages where we might get involved. Altitude have also got a development arm, so we might you know, buy the rights to a book, say, and work with someone to develop that into a script, and then eventually it'll come through to the distribution team. At Altitude, it's slightly unusual in that, yeah, we have the development and production side, we have an international sales team, and we've got the UK distribution, and we don't necessarily always take the product that they have, but a lot of the times we can, but it just means we have the freedom to go out and find things that are from different sales agents, but we can also kind of buy it in-house. The sort of thing that Altitude are looking for is, well, it varies, but we have a lot of British films, a lot of first-time directors. You know, we did Beast, and more recently we did Calm with Horses, Lady Macbeth, that kind of film. The quite cool, you know, critically acclaimed British titles, but then we also do more commercial things. We had Horrible Histories, for example, which was one that was an example that we took it all the way from development right through. So we were working on that for like 6 years, way before I started at Altitude. So yeah, we get it from lots of different places. I think, yeah, that's what we do.
So with the films that you acquire as like a finished product, is there an average time between how far in advance do you see that film? How long does it take to get to the cinema?
It'll vary for every film, really. We'll see, say we bought it at Cannes in May. Sometimes you might want to do it quite quickly and capitalise on the buzz that was generated there and do it across the summer. Other times you might want to wait until, you know, we might want to launch it at London Film Festival, for example, and then it's going to be in the earlier autumn, or we might want to wait until proper awards season, January, Feb. It all kind of depends on that film and what attention it's getting and whether it's part of that awards conversation. We might want to avoid it entirely and wait all the way until the next spring, where it's going to have a bit more space to, you know, it's not competing against all the big awards stuff. So we might release it in March or April, where it's going to be one of like the only, you know, quality titles. Obviously kind of trends change in that respect all the time. So every year is going to be different, but we just have to look at the calendar and decide when's going to be best for that particular film. So you can have something waiting for like up to a year after you've acquired it before that's the best time.
And you said then about taking into account stuff like award seasons. So do you take any other factors into account when you're planning a release strategy, as well as the particular release date? Do you plan what sorts of cinemas you want that film to play in?
Yeah, so a big part of my job especially is looking at comp titles. So we'll go through and make a list of comparative titles. So, you know, it might be based on the director, what they've done before, what the stars that are in it, the kind of genre that it is. You know, there'll be particular dates that horrors, for example, work best, or, you know, obvious things like if you've got a kids film, you want to do it in a school holiday. So all those things are kind of taken into account, and you know, as well as budgets, and sometimes it can come down to like when the talent's available to support it. Like if we know we can get someone on Graham Norton, but they can only do it, you know, on the second week of March, then we'll do it around that. So it really depends film by film on the circumstances. But yeah, that's so there's lots going into it.
Have you ever had to change release dates?
Well, like, we had to cancel a lot of films in March. Yeah, sadly we'd saved a lot of films up for April this year, which was unfortunate. But yeah, things get changed quite a lot, especially, you know, if a bigger film drops onto your date, that can be frustrating, or even not necessarily a bigger one, just one that would kind of cannibalize on your audience. You know, you don't want to go against a James Bond film, for example, or, you know, a superhero film in general. It's best to stay away. So that can be kind of down to things outside your control. Obviously, sometimes there's issues with the film, and something might just not get finished as quickly as you want it to. So yeah, sometimes we will have to change. It's not ideal, but it's kind of just keeping a constant eye on the environment and what else is going to be happening at the time.
And how do you decide on the size of the release? Like how many cinemas, you know, 10 cinemas or 300, and what factors influence your decision there? And also some different models of release.
Yeah, again, the comp titles will come into that. You know, if there's some that are kind of more obvious than others, you know, if with Horrible Histories it was just go in as many cinemas as possible, whereas others it's much more like take a list of there's a database, so we can see what from in the most part which cinemas did well with which films, and, you know, how long they played for, how much money they took, so we can make a kind of wish list based on that if it's going to be a more contained release. A lot of the time it comes down to budgets, you know, how much we expect it to make at the box office, and then, you know, we can decide how many. Obviously the more cinemas we go in, the more expensive it is for us to release. So some of it will come down to that, and just the size of the campaign that we can generate. If you want, you know, a film to be released in 500 cinemas, you kind of need the campaign that's going to back that up. So not only does it cost more to supply the cinemas with the film, you have to spend more on marketing, you have to have a bigger campaign overall. So you kind of have to weigh up the risks and the kind of film it is, based on all those different factors. But yeah, comp titles is a big thing, especially for my job. You kind of have to look what worked for other people, for other films, and how you can take the best bits of other people's plan and make it. I think it doesn't happen as much anymore, the expansion release, but it does happen still sometimes, especially around award season, where something will get released on, you know, 10 cinemas to start with, and then expand out over the weeks. So Altitude, before my time there, had Moonlight, which, so obviously I can't take any credit for it at all, but they released it on, you know, 30 sites, I think, in mid-Feb, and then it built up, and then end of Feb it won the Best Picture Oscar, and so then obviously it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and you wouldn't want to have taken Moonlight into 400 cinemas to start with, because you know the awareness might not have been there as much as it can feel sometimes like the whole industry is talking about something. If you actually, you know, ask Auntie Sue if they've heard of it, they won't have. But if it's won that Oscar, all of a sudden everyone wants to see it, so you want to give as many people as possible. But it's a tricky balance between, because you know, with Best Will in the World, things that are talked as awards films sometimes just don't end up connecting in that way. And then if you've committed to 400 films and it doesn't even get nominated, it can be a tricky balance. But yeah.
And how much influence, I'm not sure if this is the area you work in, Bryony, but if you can share any insight on how much influence do the filmmakers themselves have over the key creative of a campaign? So is that a difficult relationship to manage?
I'm sure sometimes it is. It varies by project. Like my marketing team, Altitude's marketing team, I think it'll depend a lot. Like, say we have a British film that we've been on board with quite early, and we may be doing the international sales for it as well. Then we'll definitely work with the filmmakers quite a lot, and they'll, you know, have ideas that they want to bring into it, which we'll always try and listen to. Which, you know, we're quite a collaborative distributor, so yeah, they'll probably get quite a lot of say and be involved from the start. But then there's other ones that if we acquire the finished film from a different sales agent, the filmmaker might just have final approval. So if we change the poster, they get to say yes at the end, but they don't really have much input up to that point. Obviously, the bigger the film and the bigger the stars, the more control they'll have. So if you've got an A-lister involved, it's probably going to be written in their contract somewhere that they get to approve their image on the posters. So yeah, it really depends on the level. But for a lot of Altitude things, because we are maybe the first people that are going to release it, if it's a British film, we will work quite closely. But there are times when, you know, our opinion about what's going to work commercially is different from, you know, everyone wants a really cool poster, but it might not necessarily work. You know, if it's on the iTunes scroll through, it has to be, you know, certain, you can't have too much writing on it and stuff like that. So there's certain commercial things which, you know, a director doesn't really need to think about at that point, but we need to be aware of that kind of consideration, and sometimes it does get tricky, but in general we can find a compromise, and obviously we all want as many people as possible to see that film, so there's always a compromise.
I'm going to ask one more question and then take some, because there's quite a few questions coming in. You mentioned Graham Norton. I was just wondering how you get press coverage for a film, especially some of the smaller titles you were talking about.
Yeah, so we'll work mostly with agencies or freelancers for PR a lot of the time. So they're obviously, their entire job is doing this all the time. So they're in constant contact with all the reviewers and the feature writers. So it's much easier for them to kind of, they're not starting from scratch every time. They're having constant dialogue with all the critics, and can kind of tell them what's coming up. So yeah, they'll make targets for who they want, who would be a good match for that film, or who they want to write interviews and that kind of thing. And yeah, they work with any talent that's available. We don't always have, you know, actors that we can use, so then it's about being more imaginative with any features, how you could maybe link it to something that was happening in the world, like a news item, you could make it relevant to that. So for the smaller films, sometimes there's a lot more imagination has to go in to it, and, you know, try and think of some stunts or something that will get a bit more attention. But yeah, the PR agencies are kind of doing that all the time. So yeah, there's certain ones that'll be, you know, particularly good at doing horror films or kids films, for example. So it's just about working with your agency to get the best out of what you've got.
Right. I've got, maybe unsurprisingly, a few questions in the Q&A box about how to get a job in film distribution, I guess. So I've got someone who's at university, and how would you suggest they get involved now if they're looking to get involved with film distribution when they graduate, and people that are not at university as well, and what sort of work experience should they be trying to get?
Yeah, so I think if you're at university, I mean, obviously I was in my student cinema. I don't think all universities have them, sadly. Maybe you could set them up. That would be a good thing for your CV. But also, you know, working for your local cinema, so many people started out in their local cinema, even from the distribution side. A lot of people, you know, work in their cinema and then get into programming and then maybe make the switch across to distribution. If you can do work experience or internships at different distribution companies, that's ideal. Obviously, it kind of involves you coming to London, which I know is more achievable for some people than others, sadly. Looking for schemes like the ICO have got schemes for mostly for exhibition, but then on the other side there's the FDA. If you look, I think their website is launchinfilms.com or something like that. They've got a really good internship program which is paid for, so you actually get paid to work, which is nice. And I know a lot of people, at least 3 people I think who work for Altitude, started out on an FDA scheme, so that's really good. I think that's probably for when you've graduated more than while you're at uni, but yeah, any experience you can get working for a cinema, or if you know, if there's not a cinema, there'll probably be, there's so many film societies and community cinemas run by volunteers that you can get involved with. That's a good place to start, because it gives you a good foundation of, you know, how to get an audience interested and marketing, and you know, the smaller the organization, the more you're going to be able to do, so you'd be able to find something that interests you. I know when I was at uni, I was doing programming, I did marketing, I ended up doing a bit of like the treasury stuff, and it's just, yeah, it's so good to get a little insight into different things, because as I say, I didn't know distribution existed, so you know, it's like,
Yeah,
it's just a good way of getting to know about everything.
we had a couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion with 2 film programmers, and they said the same thing about working in cinemas, smaller cinemas, and being able to get experience in doing different things, and discovering what they wanted to do actually through that. So it's quite similar. I've got one question that it's going to go back to acquisitions a bit. What's the negotiation process like in acquiring films? Is it mostly down to money, or are there any other factors that come in?
I think there probably are. I know sometimes Altitude might get a film, and we're not the biggest bidder, but we might, you know, show how enthusiastic and how much we love the project. So you'd like to think that comes into it as well. You know, if we can show, you know, we've worked with this kind of film before and this is what we did, and look how great it was, and you know, Moonlight won an Oscar, and even though we had nothing to do with that, but you know, I think that does come into play for some people. I think it depends on the film again. Like if someone's got a big commercial film with A-listers in, they probably are going to be looking for who can bid the most, because you know they've probably spent a lot on making it, but they also want to make sure that you're going to commit to spending a lot on the marketing campaign as well. And yeah, I think passion does come to bear on those passion projects, you know, but money does talk quite a lot.
And similarly, in when you're approaching cinemas with the films or exhibitors, there's a question right from the start about this and about when you're trying to approach cinemas with your product. How important are your relationships with film exhibitors and programmers, and how do they differ depending on the venue type or size?
Really important. For me, especially for an indie, we can't guarantee the big box office sometimes. So sometimes, we're asking for favors. But more than that, it's, I think in general, a good relationship is good just because we're talking to these people every week, and you need to have a rapport with people. I think it's important. And then, so an indie venues are, art house venues might have different considerations to the multiplexes. They might program much further in advance, for example, so they need to know, if what the dates are sooner, and if they're going to change. The multiplexes will probably be more interested in how much money you're spending behind the film, and how wide you're going with it, and the box office comparisons that you're using, whereas obviously art houses have kind of got this cultural remit where it should be a good film, it should be reviewed well, so it's kind of about showing whichever cinema you're talking to that their audience is gonna A, find out about the film through your campaign, and B, turn up and watch it. So it's kind of persuading them that you're doing that work to get their audiences in, which obviously they have to do that work as well for consistently. But yeah, that relationship's really important. I've asked for many a favour in my time, which I don't always get. I think for an indie especially, it's important because, if you've got Star Wars, the conversation's not going to be whether they play it, it's going to be how often they play it and how many screens it's playing in, and how long it's going to run for. Whereas if I'm turning up with some small British indie film, it's going to be more important to get it into the cinema in the first place, and then we can start talking about if it's going to have an evening show, or if it's going to have just a matinee, or that kind of thing. So it's a slightly different conversation, and obviously the bigger studios have slightly more power than I do sometimes. But yeah, that's the fun of it.
That's right. There's a question linked to that actually about the example you gave of Moonlight, where you started off in just a few cinemas, but then expanded a lot following the Oscar buzz, or a similar film to Moonlight. In those cases, is it cinemas calling you up asking for the film, or are you actively going out and trying to convince more cinemas to fit it into their schedule?
It's a good question. It's a bit of both, I'd say. If you've got a film like that on your hands, you know that it's a possibility that it might get that sort of attention. So you'd be talking to the programmers quite early on and saying, okay, well, we're going to start small and then expand out. So they might have already got it booked for week 2 or 3 based on that. But then there's always going to be last minute additions after things like that, especially for the more commercial ones. Like they'll probably have reserved a slot for whatever wins Best Picture. Even if they've already played it in the past, they'll probably bring it back. So yeah, it's kind of an ongoing discussion. And thinking about something like Parasite, for example, traditionally, obviously, it was a foreign language film, critically lauded, and obviously everyone kind of knew about it. And cinemas were begging to play that from the start because it was such a buzzy title, and the distributors kind of had to say no and keep it quite contained, and then knowing that they were going to expand later on. And obviously that can be a tricky discussion to have with cinemas who want to play it, but it's all kind of part of the strategy of kind of making it seem special and making sure that that first weekend is going to be so big, and there's going to be sellout shows, and the screen average is going to be so big that the week 2 it only builds up and builds up. If you start, you could have opened Parasite on 400 sites, but yeah, you miss that kind of you know, the demand. It'll be more stretched out across a lot more cinemas, which, you know, if you're Odeon and you want to show it everywhere, that can be quite frustrating, but it's kind of the best thing for that film.
Okay. That's great, thank you. I'm just going through some of these. I guess some of these, personally, do you have an example of a film or a campaign, you know, that you were particularly proud to work on?
Lots. I've been actually really lucky to work for some really good films. I think, thinking back to Icon, for example, we released It Follows and The Babadook, which I'm not a horror person, but they were kind of unusual in that they had like all these 5-star reviews as well as being like genre films. So they were quite unusual, and that was one where we did have a bit of a different strategy where I think we started out in about 180 cinemas for both of those, and it was one where all the buzz built up so much, even though they were independent releases and we didn't spend as much as a normal, like Universal would have spent on a horror film, but the buzz and the critical reaction was so good that we expanded it week 2, which is so unusual for a horror film. And it also, there were horror films that were playing in, you know, Curzon sites and Picture House sites that wouldn't have usually taken. I'm being very generalising that in case anybody's watching, but you know, you wouldn't necessarily think of the art house crowd as horror fans, but because they were so good and the campaign kind of galvanised around them, that was really exciting to work on. And that we also had The Nice Guys at Icon, which was just really fun. And that was kind of like, you know, it was Russell Crowe, Ryan Gosling, big Leicester Square premiere. So that was kind of my first glimpse at a big, you know, title. And again, if in somebody else's hands, they would have spent a lot more money on that, but we had to be, you know, as restrained as we could, and just kind of use we had Ryan Gosling again on Graham Norton. Graham Norton's a very big deal. So, you know, we had to, that was a big part of our campaign, and we had to be more imaginative about what we could do with less resources for that one. One that I'm really looking forward to, which is a real shame that didn't get released, is Rocks for Altitude, which is really unusual film in that it's a 75% female cast and crew. Cast is even more than 75%, but it was a really collaborative process, and they worked with some young girls from East London to kind of craft the script. They had the actors before they had the script, and then kind of wrote it after that, and it's just a beautiful film. Sarah Gavron directed, but as I say, yeah, 75% female, and it's go see it when it comes out at some point in the world. But yeah, that's a really exciting film to work on.
What are you doing with that release, or can you not say, Bryony? It's fine. You could
hopefully it'll be in the summer, but yeah, it depends on, you know, when cinemas are open. But again, that's going to be quite good to work on, because we'll probably end up doing something more exciting with it than we maybe would have before, or something that's a bit more unusual, because there's so many different parameters now that we're working within. So yeah, but it's good, it's exciting.
I've got two similar questions. One of them is, have you ever worked on a film campaign where you dislike the film? I'm going to let you go yes or no with that one, maybe. I don't want to get you in trouble, and follow it up with, have you worked on any campaigns that just haven't worked as you hoped they would, and the reasons for that?
Yeah, definitely worked on films that didn't like, or not even that didn't like. Yeah, I'm not even going to think too hard of an example, but I did release I think, was it the third Transporter film, the one that didn't have Jason Statham in it? That was challenging. But ones that were good that didn't work was one particular example, A Most Violent Year, which is one of those that we released in the awards corridor, but it didn't end up getting that awards buzz, so it kind of didn't get any of the attention that was going to all the other films, even though the reviews were great. But again, if, you know, I can't remember what came out on the same week, but if Peter Bradshaw, for example, gives a full page review to the big Oscar film and you're kind of in the little corner at the side, you get overlooked in that respect, and you also kind of get overlooked in the cinemas as well. So we were really struggling to find sites that could play it, especially for as many shows as you'd want. So that was really disappointing, because that's an absolutely brilliant film that, yeah, not many people got to see because it kind of got a bit lost. Whereas if we released it in April, for example, and it kind of stood out and had room to breathe, it'd be known as a cult classic. But there's other ones that we were really excited to work on that didn't work out so well. Things like The Happy Time Murders at STX was such a great concept. It was like a puppet film with Melissa McCarthy and a puppet as like a comedy cop duo, and it went on so late. The film only got finished like a month before it came out. And it just wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be. So we had so much excitement, and it was such a great trailer that we had. And then by the time it actually came out, it kind of fizzled out a bit. So that was a shame. But yeah, I've worked on so many, not necessarily bad films, but just that either don't get the attention they deserve, or it's kind of, yeah, it's quite heartbreaking to wake up on the Monday morning and know that you've got to go and try and find some holdovers for a film that's just nobody wanted to see at all, which is sad.
Someone asked earlier actually about, with you mentioning holdovers, about what a typical day or maybe week would look like for you. You know, what does a film distributor actually do?
So yeah, Monday is holdover day. That's the day that everybody in the office knows not to go near the sales team, because they're either sad or having an argument with someone, or it's less bad than I'm told it used to be. I'm quite lucky. You know, if you're in the 90s, you'd be having Barneys down the phone shouting at people, but it's much more passive aggressive emails now.
Would you mind just briefly explaining what a holdover is?
What a holdover is, yes.
Yeah.
So basically the film will come out on a Friday, and based on the figures for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the cinemas will decide on the Monday whether they're going to keep it on for the next week, or if they do keep it on, how many shows it's going to get, what time they're going to show it at. So it's a really important way to, you know, get as much box office as possible, and it's also a really important reason why, and it's quite a sad reason why, everyone has to go see a film on the opening weekend, and if they don't, nowadays there's so many films out every week that it's really hard if you don't work immediately to keep it going. So yeah, every Monday you're kind of competing against the other films that are also out and any that are coming out the next Friday. So the cinemas obviously have to juggle between what they think will work best. So yeah, that's holdovers on a Monday, and then yeah, the Tuesday and the rest of the week you're planning ahead for whatever the next release is. You're having meetings with the marketing teams and PR teams, finding out about the campaigns, because it's kind of our job to be the go-between between the campaign that's happening and the cinemas. So we have to tell them what's going on and what the plans are. So a lot of my job is talking to cinemas. In normal times, it's a good job because I get to go for lunches with people and, you know, schmooze them a little bit, which is definitely a perk of the job. Getting to, because, you know, I've worked, whatever film company you're at, you're talking to the same people, be it from Odeon or Picture House or wherever. So, you know, some of these people I've known for 5 years. So, you know, if you get to go out and have a lunch on work, then that's even better. I've made it sound like it's so cushy now, but yeah,
no, I mean, you sound like you're
good.
missing it. But...
yeah, a little bit. I don't think I realised how much I'm missing the lunches, especially. But yeah, so the rest of the week is planning and talking to cinemas and just Tuesday's the day where the calendar comes out, for example. So you have to see if there's been any changes, anything's gone onto your dates, and whether you need to react to that. Just keeping an eye on the biz. I can't believe I just said that.
When you people who've been on these sessions before will know I just hop about a bit because the questions come in about getting into film distributor or getting into the sector. One of them is about what you need in your skill set. So I've got someone on here that works as a marketing assistant, someone else that works in sales, and how they make the most of that experience when, for example, if their CV landed on your desk at Altitude, what key things would you be looking for?
Oh, I'd be looking for, I mean, it sounds really boring, but admin is actually quite a big part of it.
That's what the film program is.
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Spreadsheet. They spend their life on spreadsheets. I can imagine. I think being personable, especially for sales, as I say, you have to talk to people quite a lot. So that's, I don't know how you'd express that so much in a CV, but yeah, just being able to build good relationships with people, working well as part of a team. Examples of stuff you'd worked on, that'd be useful to know. I'm trying to think. I've only really ever hired a couple of people. I'm trying to think what they had on their CVs. One of them had coached women's football, so that's not related, is it? But yeah, just enthusiasm, teamwork, enthusiasm, personability. You need to be able to get on, especially Altitude with such a tiny team. There's like 6-8 of us doing the UK distribution, so we have to be nice people. I don't know how you'd put that on your CV. I'm a nice person.
I'm a nice person. So a couple more questions that have come in that I've jotted down. What happens to a film after it has played in cinemas? So do you manage the digital DVD release, or does someone else do that? Or do you do it? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so we have, like with the PR, we have a head of home end, and he'll work with our agencies called Spirit, and they have the sort of relationships that I have with cinemas, they have with iTunes and Google and all the grocers, so your Asda's and your Tesco, whoever sells DVDs, which is, yeah, sadly just supermarkets really nowadays, and the odd HMV. Sorry, FOP. Also FOP are very important to us. But yeah, so they talk to them mostly, but we'll decide, when it comes out. From the start, obviously, before it comes out in cinemas, we'll have had to decide whether it's going to be a full window release. So that'll mean that the DVD release is 16 weeks after it comes out in the cinemas, or we might do it at the same time, or we might have a smaller window. But we have to take into consideration that some cinemas won't play it if it doesn't have a full window. So all those things we have to decide before it even comes out in the cinema. And then, Spirit kind of take it from there, and they do all the technical work to actually get it on the platforms and onto the internet.
Another question that I think has come up a lot recently is, do you think that online releases and theatrical releases can work simultaneously?
Yeah, I mean, we've done kind of every sort of release under the sun. So we've had full theatrical windows, we've had day and date releases, so it'll be on premium services at the same time as the cinema, and it can definitely work, I think. As always, it depends on the film, but some examples. We work with Sky Cinema, who released Extremely Wicked and that really long title that I can't remember. And that was on Sky the same time as it was in cinemas, and it did really well in cinemas. It was like the second in all the cinemas that week. It's second only behind Avengers. I mean, part of that might be because nothing else released at the same time as Avengers, but it did do really well, and it stayed in cinemas for a long time. And obviously it was on Sky at the same time, so it can work. And we helped Netflix last year release their films, which had a small window. They had 3 weeks in general before it came on Netflix, but even after it was on Netflix, people want to see those films in the cinema, especially something like The Irishman, which is so, cinematic, and all the reviews are so good, that people definitely like to have that choice of going to the cinema. Not that, I can totally understand why bigger exhibitors wouldn't choose to go at the same time, but it does work for those films where you wouldn't necessarily be able to justify a huge theatrical campaign and then wait in 16 weeks and then trying to reignite it for the online campaign. Sometimes it just, it makes sense for that film.
Is there, I'm just going through, it's like a quick fire round, we'll call it. Is there a particular genre of film that is more sellable, regardless of whether a star is attached or not?
Oh, that's a good one. I'd say horror doesn't depend that much on stars. And they're quite cheap. They can be quite cheap to produce as well. So like Blumhouse is quite famous for that model of having quite a cheap production, and then it can make so much money because you've only spent, say, $1 million to produce the film, and then they work with Universal a lot, who'll release that film and it'll take $100 million worldwide. So it's such a great model if you can do it right. And yeah, horror is definitely one that you don't need stars for. What else would be? We've obviously done a lot of British first time films, so obviously they have less star power usually. It's always nice when you kind of work with casting agents to get people who are just on the cusp, So we had Beast, which had the girl whose name I've completely forgotten, who then went in to be Wild Rose, and it all kind of, she's obviously on the up, but we had a first. So it's there is definitely, I'd say horror's the biggest one that you could do a really big release without much attached to it. But yeah, I'm sure others will come to me tonight when I'm laying down.
Someone's just said her name's Jessie Buckley.
Jessie Buckley, thank you.
My name's Gemma Buckley. I was thinking, I know her name's Buckley. But, so another one would be, is there an active push within distribution to get more films released by female directors? Emily?
Yes, I think so. I think that's where big Hollywood studios can take a lot more they can take leadership, because they are involved from that early stage, so they can, as they're developing a script, they can attach it to someone like that. But I think in general there's a lot of schemes. I'd say, I'm not an expert on this, but we work a lot with like the BFI and Film 4, and because they've got public funding, they have to be taking a lead in that kind of thing. And I know the BFI have put a lot of diversity. It's terrible that a woman director has to class as diverse, but they have a lot of diversity like boxes that you have to tick, which is a terrible way of saying it, but so to be able to get public funding, I think that's going to rely on more, that's going to get more and more important for early directors. I hope so. I think there's definitely much more awareness of it than when I first started.
A couple more I've got. I mean, you mentioned the close team that you have there, and I'm sure that's the same at a lot of other independent film distributors. So how have you adapted to working at the moment?
Zoom, which is you know, the same for everyone. I think, yeah, it's kind of trying to recreate that. There's so many decisions that are taken on the fly just in the office, just as things come up, and like phone calls that you might have which it'll change your plan about something. And obviously working at home, you need to remember to relay that as you would across a desk. So yeah, we've just had regular meetings. We were having meetings every morning, which got a bit too much, but yeah, now we have, I think, about 3 meetings a week with the whole team, and then other ones that'll be for specific things. Yeah, WhatsApp. Yeah. A lot of gifts going around. But yeah.
You still manage to recreate that. I suppose it's, you know, you will still feel like you're part of a team, which must be very important in a small company like yours, and like ours as well, actually. So would you which one should I go for? Would you ever consider alternative screening venues other than commercial cinemas or cinemas, or is that just said too much trouble and not enough payback to even consider? His words or her words, not mine.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the venue and the film, but like we work quite closely with film societies and community cinemas, for example, and like pop-up venues. I know we've got a David Attenborough project, and yeah, we're definitely on the lookout for imaginative like outdoor venues and that kind of thing. Yeah, it can be a lot of trouble if they don't have the right equipment, and that kind of thing, but I'd say at Altitude at least are open to such possibilities. Yeah.
What I'll just maybe got 2 more. This one, this has come up before. What impact, and I appreciate, Bryony, you can't speak on behalf of the whole sector.
I can, don't worry.
What impact do you think that COVID-19 will have? How it affect traditional theatrical distribution for films?
Well, it's tricky because the optimist in me is like, everyone's going to appreciate how much they miss the cinema and go flooding back as soon as they're able to. But realistically, I think there will be people like that, but there is going to be a lot of people who might be more wary of it. And obviously anything that's bad for exhibition is bad for us. You know, things like the capacity of screens, if they're on, you know, a third of the capacity, it means that, you know, say if Tenet does come out in July, they might have had in the past, they would have been on quite a lot of screens anyway, but say they had 3 screens out of a 10 screen cinema. Now they might, to make up for the lack of capacity, they might be in 6 or 7 screens. So, you know, if you've got a film that's against that, you're obviously not going to have as much available to you. So that's a practical consideration. Obviously, it sounds like the multiplexes are going to start opening in July or whenever they're allowed to, but smaller indies, it's just not possible. If they've only got 1 or 2 screens, they're not going to be able to do it, and stay, you know, making enough money to kind of make it worthwhile opening. So there might be, it sounds like a lot of indies won't even open until later in the summer. So that's going to be unusual, especially for us who are got a lot of independently leaning films, to kind of balance that, the different opening times. I think box office will suffer for quite a while, especially, you know, any film that's made for an older audience, for example. We don't know how confident older people are going to be to come out again. I know from a lot of industry surveys, parents and teens are going to rush out, apparently. So, you know, maybe those horror films for teens are going to the B movies are going to make a comeback in drive-ins in America. We've seen a lot of B movies taking the taking a lot of money, so maybe there's going to be a whole resurgence of B movies across the summer. Who knows?
Well, I had one more question for you, and now I've lost it. Oh yeah, a lot of people, these sessions are for young film programmers and similar young people interested in film exhibition. So a lot of them would want to do your job, Bryony. So I just wanted to ask you if there were any particular campaigns that you wish you'd worked on that you admire.
Oh, so I mentioned Parasite, which was obviously just a wildly successful film, although the more I think about it, I'm not sure I would want to work on it, because it was nice to admire from the outside without any of the pressure of actually trying to make a success of the film. You want to work on the films that you love, but it's also tricky because then it's so much more disappointing if it doesn't work, or people don't appreciate it as much as you do. So I don't know, I would have liked to work on Lady Bird, maybe. That was a great campaign. Booksmart. I have the film taste of a teenage girl. That's all I can think about. But yeah, I think I would love to work with Greta Gerwig especially. But yeah, Parasite is obviously the most recent example of something that's just kind of just did so well on every level. Like that. It was quite a risk for them to wait that long to release that film. It came out it premiered in Cannes, and then they waited nearly a whole year until the Oscars not in a whole year, till February. And a lot of other countries had already released it, but they just took that risk and timed it really well. As much as it, loads people at Altitude are like, oh, we could have bought that film, we should have done that, and I'm kind of like, oh, thank God we didn't. I could just and I could admire it from the outside.
Oh, it's great. I'm gonna have to leave it there because we're more or less out of time. Before we go, I just want to say that our next webinar will be at the same time next week, and we're going to be joined by BAFTA winning filmmaker John McLean, who will be talking about his career path from the Gate Cinema in Notting Hill all the way through to being awarded the World Cinema Jury Prize at the 2015 Sundance Film Festival for his debut feature Slow West. So we'll be sending around more information about that tomorrow. Please do sign up. So just thank you so much for joining us today, Bryony, and for being so generous and honest with your... Oh
God, don't say that, I'll start panicking. What did I say?
No, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone else that joins us today. I do hope that we'll see you again next week. Thank you.